Our last topic for this show, we are reaching the midpoint of the year. It's time for Wall Street firms to start updating their end of year forecast. Adam, what's your take on what you're seeing in the market?
Well, it's interesting over the last week that several large banks have increased their estimates for the S&P 500 is going to end the year. Goldman and Citi went up to 5,600, which now after the last couple of days is only a few percent up from where it was. But their previous estimates would have required the market to actually fall, which clearly they don't think is going to happen. And Evercore went up to 6,000 from their previous level of 4,750. So they're thinking there's another almost 9.5%, 10% of gains for the year. And look, I have a lot of sympathy for people whose job it is to estimate where the S&P is going to go over the next 6 months. I'd rather guess when Taylor Swift gets married than where the S&P is going. That's a very difficult task, and you're never going to get it right. And all that's really happened is that the market's done well over the first half of the year, up 15% or something. And they've said, well, we don't necessarily think it's going down, so we got to adjust our numbers. It's not rocket science. I wouldn't put too much faith in any of these numbers. I think that the information they're really telling us is more just directional than anything else, which is they're saying, hey, I think the market, I don't see an imminent crash, and I'll adjust my numbers if things change.
Yeah, I think that they tend to chase the market around, and occasionally you'll get a rogue economist who comes out with a different view. And, once in a while they're right, but more often than not, they're wrong. And so one of the more interesting things to focus on is just what's the expectation for earnings growth versus where valuations are today. Valuations at 21, 22 times forward earnings estimates are relatively elevated. You've got expectations of anywhere between 10 and 11.5% for earnings growth. And by the way, we've already seen, a 15-ish% increase in the S&P 500 this year. It indicates that these economists expect either earnings to accelerate in the back half of the year, or they expect valuations to continue pushing higher. It more than likely indicates that valuations are going to continue pushing higher because the Fed's expected to reduce interest rates. Is that going to be what actually happens? Nobody knows, but they're not going to change that estimate until something bad happens that pushes the market down 10+% most likely. So if you're listening to these economists, you're always going to be behind because they're always reacting to what the most recent move was in the market.
Yeah, to your point, Austin, Goldman, when they upped their estimate, said it was due to higher fair value PE multiples. So they're basically saying we're gonna assume the market has a higher multiple for a little while, and therefore our estimate goes up. What I found fascinating, though, and the most interesting comment was when Citi's increase, where they attributed it to investors are living in unusual times. What does that mean? I don't know. If someone said, "Hey, you should buy this thing," why? Because we're living in unusual times. I think I would tell them to go pound sand.